You're listening to Almost Cooperstown, the place where near Baseball Hall of Famers live, wait, hope, and die. Since 1876, more than 19,000 players have set foot on Major League Baseball fields. There are 235 actual players that have been elected to the Hall of Fame, and we think there's room for a few more.
The Hall of Fame is comprised of 333 elected members. Included are 235 former major leaguers, 31 executives, 35 Negro leaguers, 22 managers, and 10 umpires. There are currently 81 living members. I'm Mark. I'm here with my son Gordon, and this is Almost Cooperstown.
We're here to kind of discuss and go over all the guys that almost made it into Cooperstown, and a lot of them that we think that should actually be in there, given the extremely low number of elected players that have made it into the Hall of Fame. And so, before we go into what this show is really about, we want to just go through what you have to do to actually be eligible for the Hall of Fame. So when you're looking at it, is you have to have competed in 10 different seasons. Playing a single game in any season counts towards that. So even if you just had one at bat in a season, and that was your 10th season, you would qualify for the Hall of Fame in terms of games played. You need to be retired for at least five seasons from the last season you played. So if you played up till 2006 and then came back in 2008, it would restart and you would have to wait 5 years from 2008 until you're eligible. From there, a screening committee then approves a player's worthiness. Most people are given a token appearance on the ballot as long as they just completed the requisite playing time, and they were a regular player for most of that time. In order to remain on that ballot, you need to receive at least 5% of the votes in a given year. If you ever fall below 5, you're removed for that. You're falling off the ballot for 16 years after the retirement. And then you're considered elected only if you receive 75% of all ballots cast in that election. And at that point, you've made it into the Hall of Fame. So what about all the guys that haven't made it into the Hall of Fame? So my dad and I thought that it would be a great idea for us to kind of independently go about and pick a full team of players, of guys that aren't in the Hall of Fame that we thought should actually be in there.
We decided to keep the steroid guys out of this conversation for the time being. We'll pick up those guys in a future episode, and then anybody that's associated with that is not going to be included in this round here.
Yeah, we just thought that it was easier that way, especially because there's a lot of guys that kind of distort it based on your opinion. If you're saying steroids don't matter, it's just on your career, a guy like Barry Bonds is automatically in because it's a no-doubt. There's too many no-doubters, and it almost makes a list less interesting because of that. So we kind of wanted to look for a bunch of guys that maybe aren't as known. And I actually was surprised by some of the guys I found. There's some really interesting people out there that I had never heard of before.
Well, and we kind of cut it off at 1920, meaning that you had to play the bulk of your career after 1920 in order to be considered, because there's a bunch of guys that played in the 1880s and the 1890s and all that have crazy stats, but given the way the game was and whatnot, maybe don't merit Hall of Fame consideration and are where they belong.
And then a lot of the guys that were playing right after 1900 were playing during the dead ball era. So it's really difficult to judge statistics based off of that because it's such a different game. And maybe that's a discussion for another day, but we didn't want to kind of complicate things by bringing in people whose careers you really can't evaluate on the same kind of scale because the game was just physically different almost.
100%. So let's talk about positions, and we'll each go around the field, and we'll put up 9 guys. As chances are, we may have similar guys, we may not. So I've got backups, that I could consider where it's possible.
Oh yeah. There's definitely some positions where there are guys that definitely were just missing out on basically just missing out. So,
okay, so you go ahead, and why don't you throw out first base?
So, unsurprisingly, especially as a New York Mets fan, my first baseman, it has to be Keith Hernandez. Like, if you're just looking at his career, he won 11 Gold Gloves, and he did that while still hitting at a career 296 average, which for a first baseman at the time probably wasn't valued as much, but considering he had a career on base of 384, it actually showed that he was able to get on base and affect the game. And when you have a career 60 WAR in 17 seasons, it's pretty good. I mean, you're putting up just about almost 4 WAR a game.
Yeah,
4 WAR season.
And all of us, when Keith was playing, he was the finest defensive fielder at first base in the major leagues. And that was something against, the guy in the American League who, Keith won 10 Gold Gloves and Don Mattingly won 9. So, those two guys were sort of, coexisting at a time when, defense was the best it had ever been.
And you know what? He won an MVP. Like, that's big for me. Like, the fact that he was able to win an MVP, especially as a guy that didn't play in a traditional way that was valued at the time, since he wasn't hitting for really any kind of significant power most seasons, that says a lot at how much both his defensive skill and the fact that he had 344 that season was valued.
Yeah. How about, did you have a second guy?
I did have a second guy. My second guy was... I actually watched him as a little kid. He played for the New Haven Ravens. It was Todd Helton.
Oh, wow.
I'm going way back there. But, I mean, he actually put up the same amount of, almost the same identical WAR in the same number of seasons as Keith. He played for 17 seasons and put up 61 WAR. And he had a career 316. Now, obviously, Coors factors into that a little bit, but I checked the home and away splits, and he hit, I think it was a career 286 hitter on the road. So it doesn't show that he was just completely elevating himself because of the stadium. I think it does disservice to him as a hitter to say that he's just a product of playing at Coors. And while he was solid with the glove, he won 3 Gold Gloves. I mean,
actually, I can't believe that Helton won 3 Gold Gloves. I didn't know he was that good a fielder. But I kind of agree. Those Colorado guys have a bias. Larry Walker getting elected this year. That's going to make it easier for good Colorado players. I don't know that Troy Tulowitzki will ever have a sniff at the Hall of Fame, but he certainly had a start in Colorado that seemed like it was going that way. I had another guy, that I rated right up there, and I had mentioned him with the 9 Gold Gloves, also with an MVP himself. And a career 307 average at first base. And Don Mattingly, I don't think was quite as good as Hernandez, but he was damn good. And he deserves an opportunity to I think be in Cooperstown with Hernandez. So if I'd put one in, I probably would put the other. So, okay. Well, let's go to, second base. And, I will throw out the first player there, and he's a guy that I don't think you know much about. And I remember him being an excellent ball player, and when I went back and looked at his stats, they were better than I thought. A guy named Bobby Grich. And Bobby Grich played 17 seasons. Gordon and I are counting seasons where you played 30 games or less as not real seasons. You played barely a month or about a month at the most, and we don't want that to count. So we're looking to try and have an average WAR for players at 3 or higher as sort of an underlying, understanding of what makes a good player. Bobby Grich had 71 WAR in 15 seasons. That's way above the number. And as a second baseman, he hit 224 homers. People didn't do that then. He won 5 Gold Gloves. He was a multiple All-Star. Just a terrific, excellent player, and outperformed the people at the position by so much at that time. And I think that was sort of the shift into much better second baseman. So he's my pick.
So, I mean, you got somebody, he's got a lot of career WAR, which is impressive. But I have somebody who has more career WAR. Going to Detroit Tigers second baseman, Lou Whitaker. Now, this is not obviously somebody that I watched play, but he amassed 75 WAR in, by our count, 18 seasons. He only won 3 Gold Gloves, so not quite as dominant as considered highly as a defensive second baseman. But he had 244 career home runs.
Well, he played when Bobby Grich did at the end of, at the end of Bobby's career. So yeah.
So he kind of took over from him from there. But 244 career home runs, so he had still quite a bit of power at that time too, with a career 276 average. And I think, especially for a second baseman, for him to do all that is impressive, especially when you consider his middle infield partner, Alan Trammell, is in the Hall of Fame at the same time. And if you look at their career numbers, you would argue
they kind of belong in there together. I definitely feel that way.
Numbers are just about as good.
I definitely feel the same way, that they kind of both belong there. One's in the other. I would give an honorable mention to another former Yankee and a Met manager, Willie Randolph, who I think also sort of rates pretty highly there. But I would definitely put the other two ahead of that guy.
Yeah. Willie would have been my kind of backup to Lou if if you hadn't picked him as well.
So, what do you got for shortstop?
For shortstop, so I actually went deep for this one. This was somebody I had never heard of before we kind of started exploring this whole concept.
This ought to be good.
I found him. His career stats actually kind of blew me away, because you would have thought that somebody did this at his time. So for shortstop, a guy named Vern Stevens. and he played from 41 to 55, mostly with the St. Louis Browns and the Red Sox for most of his career. And looked into his offensive statistics, so they're pretty crazy when you think about it. Now, by our metric, he only had 13 eligible seasons. In those 13 eligible seasons, he put up 46 WAR, hit a career .286 with 247 home runs. At the shortstop position, he was an 8-time All-Star.
I never heard of this guy.
I mean, he hit 355 on base, 460 slugging, impressive numbers for this guy, and he put up some amazing stat lines in some seasons.
Wow. Now, do you know he played for the St. Louis Browns? Do you know what became of the St. Louis Browns?
They moved.
They did?
There's two guesses I have. It's either Atlanta and became the Braves, or Milwaukee and became the Brewers. And
you'd be wrong twice. The answer is the Baltimore Orioles. And so today they are the old St. Louis Browns. Actually, that's a straight through franchise. That's great, because I had trouble at shortstop. I think, it's a tough position, because a lot of time averages and stats, offensively aren't there because the focus for so long was on defense. And I came through a period of time where everybody was a no-hit, good field shortstop. And it was just, even Santana, who played for our Mets in '86, was not a good hitter at all and was a competent fielder. That was good enough to get you in the majors. I'd pick, somebody who had a great career average and not very well liked by his own city, and since the Yankees have gotten some cred here, I'm going to go with Nomar Garciaparra as my shortstop. And when you look at Nomar's stats, they're very good. 313 career average, like I said, hit 229, only played 12 years by our standard because he had a 24 game season, and a 21 game season. So that makes it 12. So his career WAR at 44 is certainly solid, more than 3. And maybe his biggest crime was not even being the best shortstop in the American League when Jeter was there and Tejada was there and A-Rod was there. And yet he was, every other standard at that position to perform the way that he did. I think he's undervalued at shortstop.
I think that's pretty fair. I don't know. I think the fact that he was so unable to stay on the field, he played for such a short time and struggled to stay on the field so much. I mean, that almost hurts him in a sense.
There are a few guys like that, you just think, wow, and we'll probably, come up with one later because I got one in mind as well. I'd also give an honorable mention to a guy you probably not heard much about or at all, is Bert Campaneris, who stole over 600 bases for the A's back in the 1970s, but had a career average that was not very great. So
600 stolen bases is still a lot of stolen bases.
Yeah, but it gets you, just short. 53 career WAR, career batting average of 259 for Campaneris. There were only, I believe, 3 guys in the Hall of Fame with career averages under 260. So he's not one of them, obviously, because he's not in the Hall of Fame. So
that's pretty tough.
yeah, but Campy was a pretty good player. So, how about third base? I'll let you throw the first one because I got a guy I like.
I got a guy I like. He's a little bit more recent. Killed the Mets, the Phillies, and the St. Louis Cardinals. You got to throw Scott Rowland. I mean, guy was an absolute amazing third baseman. He played 17 seasons. Every one of them is over 30. He has 30 games in over every season. One Rookie of the Year. 70 career WAR. I mean, he won 8 Gold Gloves. Hit 280 for his career with 316 home runs. I mean,
it's hard to vote for guys that kill my team all the time, but Rowland, and I never liked Chipper Jones either, but he belongs in the Hall of Fame too.
Excellence at the position, especially when it's one of the most underrepresented positions in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you look at a guy like this, if this guy doesn't belong in there, if he doesn't stand above the majority of third basemen, I don't understand who does.
So, I would agree with you, and I think he's far and away in there. The guy I'd throw as an alternative was a guy I watched play, Greg Nettles, who also played for the Yankees, also played for the Indians, but most of his damage was done as a Yankee, and just was one of the best fielding third basemen. I guess the best I saw in person, because I did see Brooke Robinson play in person, so I shouldn't say that. Brooks was pretty good, but Nettles I saw in his prime, and hit home runs, terrific third baseman, career average of 248 is why guy, even if you start looking at the other stats, your on base average and your ops and your ops plus, and Nettles fares well there, just not quite enough. So honorable mention, but not in.
Well, there's only 3 guys in there below 260, and he's in 2 below 250.
You try to look today, average was always so important when I was a kid, and it's not as important today as in evaluating a player's success. However, 248, that's just, that's not great. So, okay. How about, let's see, left field.
Moving into left field. Okay. So I had a guy, and this was somebody, until I just looked at the compactness of his career, it just jumps out at you because you think, man, if he'd only been able to just play a few more seasons, his numbers would have been otherworldly. That would be Albert Bell.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I mean, only played 12 seasons, but you have to throw out one of them because he played 9 games in 1990. So you're looking at 11 seasons. He put up 40 WAR. He hit 295 for his career and hit 380 home runs in just those 11 seasons. That's
right. If it's 10 years is the qualification point, and you did that and you played and you were excellent, it shouldn't be, well, you should have played 15 years. I feel like, if that's the qualification, the guy was excellent and he had a sustained period of excellence there.
Of incredible stats. I mean, I think what's more impressive is that he wasn't just, he hit 357 in 1994. It's pretty good.
Jay Jaffe, I read a lot of his stuff on the case for Cooperstown and whatnot. He's the guy that came up with the whole Jaws thing. He says that you should have 7 years of continued excellence. And boy, Albert Bell, definitely, did that. So, I'd agree with you. I think that's a great call because he's not a guy that comes to mind for a lot of people first. He was kind of a surly guy, so maybe people don't like him because he wasn't so nice. And another guy who's a nice guy, who I think a little underappreciated, I think should be there, is Lance Berkman. And, you kind of look at Lance's career and you think, wow, he was around for a while. He played a lot of years.
He trailed on at the end for a while because I remember him on those Ranger teams, right?
Right. And he played a lot, but he played, didn't have a season where he played less than 30 games, which is kind of interesting, which hurts him a little bit, 15 career years ending in 2013.
I'm surprised it's that few. I would have thought it would have been more for some reason.
Yeah. And he had 50, because he didn't come up he came up when he was 23, 52 career WAR. So by our standards, easy, but the consistency there, batted .293 for his career, 366 homers. He only stole 86 bases, 1,200 RBIs, ops career over 400, on base at over 400, ops at 943, ops plus at 144. Those are big numbers. 366.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. So I think, he wasn't a great fielder, and so we tend to look at the Gold Gloves, and there aren't any, but he was in the conversation for MVP every year, and by the way, Albert Bell was not a great fielder either.
I mean, you could argue that
he was more of a butcher than a
numbers. Bell, a little bit better. He has better numbers in a shorter period of time.
So that's why it's tough to get into Cooperstown. Yeah. Like I said, we feel there's 333 guys people that are in there altogether even. And, we could have a few more. There were 19,000 people that have played Major League Baseball.
1%
Well, almost like 200 players or so. So a little bit more than 1%. We could afford a few more guys in there. So, how about your center fielder?
So center fielder, interestingly, another Cardinal. But I mean, when I looked at this guy's career's numbers, it just surprised me by how good they were because I didn't realize he was this good for that long. That would be Jim Edmonds.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you throw out that his initial call up where he played 18 games, where he came up with the Angels. So he played 16 seasons, 60 career WAR. I mean, hit 280 with 393 home runs and 8 Gold Gloves. Yeah. I mean, he was an unbelievable.
He was a highlight reel watching him play. And he played for a lot of really good teams. I mean, teams that went into the playoffs, and he contributed to them. He was like a very, active postseason player. I think it was even a pretty good one.
Oh, yeah, especially for those Cardinal teams, from 2000 till 2007. He was on those teams, and he was great for that.
Fun player to watch, too. So I would throw out a couple of guys came to mind, and I think he's been underappreciated. Is Kenny Lofton, the former basketball player turned baseball player, and just had a really long career. I think is the most impressive thing because he had 17 total seasons, 16 by our count. Career WAR of 68. So that's just off the charts. And 622 steals, career average of 299. And he has gold gloves,
that's not somebody that had no glove.
He had 3 gold gloves. So, he had 3 things he did really well. He was an excellent fielder. He stole bases and he hit for a high average. And he had a good on base. So I think he really belongs in the Hall of Fame. Okay, we'll come around to right field.
So right field, I actually was surprised when I went and found this guy. So he started his career back in 66, but his first real season was 67. And then he just went on to put on a tear of seasons that are actually very impressive. And that's Reggie Smith.
Oh, Reggie Smith. I really was he was a terrific player when I watched him, when I was a kid.
A gold glove. Only one, though. But he did manage to win one. So that, to me, that means he was at least a solid defender for the majority of his career.
Cardinals and Red Sox, right?
Red Sox were his beginning of the career. Played a couple seasons for the Cardinals, but actually finished the last bunch of seasons
with the Dodgers. Right.
Other than a throwaway season. Well, not really a throwaway, but his final season with the Giants in 82. But, the guy just put up, career 287 average, 314 homers, 64 career WAR in just 16 seasons. That's pretty good.
Yeah. He belongs there.
He belongs there. He was but that's the problem. He's a very, very good player, and he's not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, well, I think he should be, and I think this guy should be too. I don't understand how he's not in the Hall of Fame. And he played for the Red Sox, Dwight Evans. Forget about anything. I remember when I watched Dwight Evans play, the guy just had a cannon for an arm. Just ridiculous arm. But his career 67 WAR in a career that ended in 1991, that spanned 20 years, only one of which we'd throw out, still averaging almost 4 WAR a season. His 385 home runs. The only knock against him, I want to say he hit 272, but, he did everything else really well. Obviously, as a fielder, on base at 370, slug 470, ops at 840. This guy was consistent for a really, really long time. Belongs in the Hall of Fame, I think. So,
I got one more to throw out there because I just think he deserves to be mentioned. Another Mets killer, both against them and with them for that god-awful final season in 2014. That'd be Bobby Abreu. That was a dark year. But, put up 60 WAR in 18 seasons, 17 by our count.
Wow.
That's pretty good. He had 290 with 288 career home runs, was 395 on base.
Was not a great fielder.
But he did win a gold glove.
And he stole some bases, right?
Some 400 for his career. That's not an insignificant number of steals.
That does matter a lot.
And he stole a good number of them for a long
Better than I thought. Again, another guy who beat my team up, so I probably devalue him a little bit because of that.
Suppressed those years.
Yeah, I try not to do that. I would have gone for a guy you didn't see play called Tony Oliva. Tony O, had knee surgeries, but he won multiple batting titles, but he just didn't have enough aggregate stats to be, considered a Hall of Fame, even though his 10 or 11 year period, I think it was only that, was almost, ridiculous. It was that good. Just not enough to sort of kick him over, unfortunately. So, okay, at catcher, I'll let you, I'll go first at catcher because I'm going to pick another Yankee. And actually the crazy thing is I have 2 Yankees. Thurman Munson, again, short career, just like we were talking about, and maybe at catcher we give him a little bit more slack because it's so, debilitating that playing shorter at catcher career, I should say, is, maybe more likely. The guy who did everything, solid hitter, fantastic fielder, gold glover, really missed the fact that he didn't get to finish his career, on the field. He probably had another 4 or 5 years of highly productive play.
He was actually my choice as well.
Okay.
He also won an MVP.
Yep.
Won Rookie of the Year. I mean, when you look at the career he amassed, especially from the position at catcher, and you have to be judging them against their peers, it's not fair to compare a catcher stats to a left fielder stats because there's just different things expected of them on the field.
And that's a great point because at that time, offense at catcher was much lower than it became when you started getting guys like Piazza playing and Pudge Rodriguez or whatnot. Their offensive stars at catcher were not that many. You had your Johnny Benches and you had a Gary Carter here.
They were the exceptions.
They were the exceptions. Most of the catchers were just sort of like a little like the shortstops I talked about before.
And so the fact that he was as good a defender as he was, on top of being as good an offensive player as he was, I think that's why you have to kind of just argue that he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, and the reason that the other guy, and I didn't particularly care for this player, but his career stats are really, really good, particularly when you look at him as a catcher, and he played for the Yankees, and that's Posada. You hit 275 home runs as a catcher and you bat 273. Okay, already you've got catchers don't do that very much.
No, they don't. There's that many home runs.
So I don't know what Brian McCann's done for his career, at this point. Maybe we'll look that up and throw that later. But, his career WAR of 42.7, not that great over what is going to be a 15-year career. And if you, by our count, it's right. It's 17 minus 2. So he's got 15 seasons. So that's actually below the 3 level. I give a little more slack to catchers on career WAR stats and things.
I wonder how much playing DH for those last few years kind of hurt him in terms of his ability to amass WAR.
That's an interesting point, and you're right. He did DH quite a bit late in his career. Anyway, I wouldn't vote him. Munson, higher over him.
Munson, just because he was he hit for a better average, and he was a far superior defender. Let's not pretend.
Absolutely. All right, so let's finish up with the pitchers.
For the pitcher, all right, who do you got?
Well, my number one pick is going to be Schilling. Yeah, you probably picked Schilling yourself.
I didn't. It's just,
another Red Sox too.
Don't love the guy, but he was a fantastic pitcher.
Yeah. And of all the guys, I think Schilling, with his career stats are just like, okay, why is this guy not in there already? So you don't have to read them, but over 200 wins, the strikeouts, the whip, every pitching stat you could come up with, this guy is near the top. So far and away, I think he is somebody that should be in there.
It's something that you kind of as something that you really can't factor in, but is a factor. You think about him. He was part of some indelible baseball moments, and you almost feel like that kind of gives him an edge in that respect. Like the bloody sock game is part of baseball.
Yeah, it's called the Hall of Fame. You do famous stuff sometimes. It should count.
That guy that was part of big famous moments. That should be that you're performing on the big stage. As much as it's an intangible factor, that is an intangible factor because part of that is being good enough to be able to be there and present in that moment, and then be able to make those kinds of big plays or big performances.
By the way, and we won't get into it here, but you talk about somebody whose one play maybe put him in the Hall of Fame, and I'd say Mazeroski of the Pirates, by hitting that home run in the 1960 World Series, got into the Hall of Fame on that one play. Was a very good ball player, but we're not talking about taking guys out today. Maybe we'll save that for some other time as to who might come out.
So my pitcher, it's actually somebody who I watched as a kid, little bit older in terms of, when his career was, more when I was an actual kid, but Kevin Brown.
He's another guy nobody liked.
Nobody liked Kevin Brown, but nobody liked facing Kevin Brown either. I mean, when you look at him for,
he had that slider that just, you knew it was coming, you still couldn't hit it.
17, I'm really giving him 17 seasons because I'm throwing out, he came up through a game and then 4 games his first 2 years technically. But so that's 17, 67 career WAR. What impressed me is the 1.222 whip.
Yeah.
The fact that means he was, I think he had less than 900 walks and 3,200.
He was a stingy pitcher.
But that's given up nobody on base. He struck out 2,400 guys, basically.
It seems like every game he pitched, and I watched him, was 2-1.
Yeah. Won 2 ERA titles. And I think what's unfortunate is he finished near the top of the Cy Young a whole bunch of times, and he just never got one. Which is rough, but he also played for some terrible Rangers.
The Rangers were not very good, but then he got on the championship Marlins team, and I think he pitched in the series for the Padres.
Yeah, 98.
So yeah, he's I just didn't like that guy. Another guy, but again, this is why we're looking at this objectively as much as possible. We've got Yankees in there, we've got Red Sox, and we've got guys we don't like, because if they belong there, then that's what we're saying. That there should be a few more guys that they should be out of Almost Cooperstown. They should be in Cooperstown.
Yeah, they belong in.
That's it for this episode of Almost Cooperstown. If you'd like to join the conversation, visit us at almostcooperstown.com.